their average is 3.86, so that's pretty darn high for overall GPA, and the science GPA is not much lower, 3.85. Their MCAT median is a 36. So NYU is a top 20 school, so yeah, so NYU is a top 20 school, so don't let those numbers scare you. But when you're just going over the numbers here, so if you just kind of, I don't know if I'm blocking anyone, but if you kind of just, can people see that? It's a little bit small, but.
Zoom in?
Yeah, so we'll come back to this, but if you just look at the median, GPA median for a lot of schools, it's generally 3.7, 3.8 for most schools. Again, that's not meant to scare you, but the reality is applying to medical school is pretty competitive. Even like schools that some people consider safety, the 10th percentile is not terribly low. It's still kind of high. Like, for instance, Albany, 3.29 GPA. Other schools like, Emory's going to obviously have a higher number. It's higher ranked, so 3.45. And of course, rankings don't necessarily mean higher. Higher rankings don't necessarily mean higher numbers, but Northwestern, for instance, 3.62. So yeah, just keep this in mind when you're applying. It's really competitive. So these are the actual averages that you're going to be working with when you're applying. So if you're thinking about, oh, should I go to a social? Should I go to like that party coming up? Your midterm scores will count. Going to a party, I mean, you can fit that in later, right? So these numbers are scary. I mean, when I was a pre-med, like freshman year, sophomore year, I had no idea what these numbers were. I heard, generally speaking, that 3.7 was a good score, or 3.5, like you want to have at least a 3.5. But if you look at this median, how many of these schools are actually 3.5? Not many, actually. Most of them are 3.7, 3.8. So you want to be very careful with your GPA. That's something that you can't fix. You can always do like research. You can always do extracurriculars later on. But with this, you want to be careful and protect your GPA, because that's always going to be there.
Yeah, and even if you don't stop, always try to finish strong, because they want to see your trajectory. So if medical school sees you maybe have a dip when you go up, that's a big thing to say on the application. So it's never too late to salvage something, but your GPA is something that lasts, which is hard to change. But we can talk about that.
Yeah, I think the lack of Boston University, I don't know, they still pretty considered a top one. They're really low rank from Boston.
Boston University? Yeah, so rankings, when you're talking about rankings, the US News Report comes out with a ranking each year, right? They have a research ranking and a primary care ranking. Research generally talks about how much funding each school gets to do research. So whether or not that directly impacts you, as a medical student, maybe yes, maybe no. If you're really into research, maybe. If you're not into research, then less likely so. When I came in as a freshman, I was like, all like, oh, I want to go to Harvard. Like, I think Harvard's a great school. I think like Johns Hopkins is a great school, Columbia, all these things, right? I was like super like focused on the rankings and all of that. But realize when you're applying, like, what's going to make you happy? Is going to Harvard going to make you think about it? If you're going to Harvard, their average is like a 3.9, and their 10th percentile is a 3.7. So 90% of the people at Harvard Medical School have higher than a 3.7 GPA coming in. That's freaking crazy, right? Like, I mean, that's scary. Do you want to be in that environment? For me, like, what makes me happy is like being able to be in a big city. So a lot of my experiences have been working with like underserved communities, urban underserved specifically. So I think that would make me happy, being in any big city. So I'm going to apply to like Chicago, New York, California, of course, and all these like big metropolitan cities. Whatever makes you happy, don't necessarily base it on the ranking of the school, because a school that's like, lower on the ranking scale still has resources. You're still going to be an MD, right? You're still going to graduate. You're still going to be able to be a doctor. So focus less on like rankings and more on like what's going to make you happy and where you can see yourself going. And also, like, at the end of the day, like, your goal is to become a physician, whether it be MD or DO. So try not to be as selective about like, applying to only the top schools. I mean, by all means, if that's your thing, go for it. But also be sure to apply to a wide a wide variety of other schools as well. Anyone else have numbers? So Boston University, I think, is like a 3.8. They have a pretty high number. Their MCAT is pretty high too. It's like a 34 or something like that. So it may not. I don't know what Boston's ranking is in the U.S. report, but it's pretty. Their numbers are pretty high. I think it's like 30s or something like that.
So once you get to the, just again emphasize just apply strategically.
Yeah.
So you said you should apply to school that makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
Where do you get information on like what school fits you best?
So generally speaking, mission statements. So like I'm all for like community medicine, like working with student-run free clinics. I've learned that when you're looking at schools, most of these schools have some sort of free clinics they're affiliated with. I was a part of UCLA Mobile Clinic during undergrad, and I volunteered at community health fairs as well. So that kind of thing is what I've done a lot of, and that's what I want to do as a medical student. But mission statements will tell you, specifically, are they more research oriented or are they more community focused? Also, when you're going on the web, so I would go to the websites of each of these schools and kind of like look around and see what they emphasize. Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia is one of those schools I've been looking at, and they're big on like clinics, they're big on like community work. So that's something that I've been looking into a lot. So kind of like just going through the websites and trying to see like what they emphasize. And also like, again, people will, you'll have a lot of pre-med advisors on campus, or your friends, or these people telling you, hey, this is what is the definition of good, or this is ideal student. These are the hard numbers. These are the numbers that medical schools submit to the AMC, which runs this whole application service. So they know this is the exact number of every single school. So unless your friends have seen this, be mindful, take advice with a grain of salt. Don't just soak everything in and take their word for it. Also do your research and make sure their sources are valid. Because again, I was a freshman, a lot of my peers, even seniors and juniors who are applying to med school, they're like, oh, 3.8 is a good GPA, but you're fine with a 3.5, you're fine with a 3.4. Realistically, you're going to be closer to the bottom 10 percentile a lot of these schools if you have a 3.5, 3.4. You want to be 3.7, 3.8. Again, we're going to talk more about extracurriculars and other options if you don't quite have those numbers, but if you're still in school right now, focus on those, focus on your grades.
So yeah, and the good news is this is where you can actually have some control over the MCAS application, the components of the MCAS application. So it's one of the few places you'll have some control once you're done with school and MCAT and everything. So the activity section, there are 15 slides. So sorry. There's a biographical section where you're going to fill out just your data entering for your GPA and schools attended, general bio information, which you can you just should take out time to do accurately, and even have somebody trustworthy look over it to make sure you filled out everything accurately, so your application doesn't get processed later because of an error.
So there are these things called primary. This is the American Medical College Application Service. This is what every school will get when you pick a school. Hey, I want to apply to this school. This is what schools will get. So they get your your biographical data, your GPA, your MCAT, your personal statement, letters of rec, all of that. And then there are things called secondaries, which schools will send you, and they're more specific essays about each school. Schools may ask, what about this school do you like? Or for instance, Stanford Secondary, they have a couple of concentrations. Where do you see yourself fit best? So there are more specific questions, but on this, you want to make sure you want to do a good job at every single step. GPA and MCAT, that's kind of fixed, but as Shimon mentioned, there are different ways that you can impact your application through personal statement, through letters of rec, through extracurricular activities.
Yeah, so your narrative activities section, it's an important section for you to write about what you did, and it's really all the experiences that are meaningful to you, that you feel have again contributed to your wanting to become a physician and preparedness for medical school. 3 of the activities out of 15 you'll select as most meaningful, and you'll have to write an additional description for those, and you should treat these almost as if you're writing an essay. with the same type of proofreading, paragraph form. It's not like a CV in that sense, but your CV will come in useful here because you'll have already summarized what you've done in the past, and articulated the most important duties of your experiences that you can just write into sort of an essay, small essay format into the activity section.
So you have 700 characters for each. So you have 15 slots total, right? So on this, you're going to list everything that more or less you want to show the schools that you've done: research, volunteering at a clinic, volunteering at student organization, leadership, being a part of like a program like MD100, shadowing. Some maybe list hobbies, like if you swim or if you play basketball or that kind of thing. This is your chance to talk about all of your activities, and there are 15 slots. Don't be worried about the number. Not everybody has 15, and that's fine. But I would say shoot for at least 10, around 10. And if you think about it, there are things that you do on a daily basis that you might not think about including, but you can come up with 10 things that you do that would come here. And then research, if you do research, then it could fall under a couple things, like if you publish or if you do a poster presentation, that'll be its own thing. Or if you get an undergraduate grant, that'll be its own thing. So keep those in mind. There are different categorizations, so paid employment, non-military versus military, clinical volunteering, non-clinical volunteering, research. So there are poster presentations, so there are a bunch of different categories. This is just an example. Again, for 15 of those, you have 700 characters. That's including spaces. So every space, every period, all of that counts. That's roughly, about maybe a quarter or a third of a page, single space.
Experience description is